Trey Yingst. You got a brand new book out. Appreciate you joining us here on Clay and Buck. But I just want to start before we get to the book. Yesterday, the attack of Iran on Israel, I believe, is 181 missiles, I think is the final number. What was that experience like for you, and what are you hearing about what happens now?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. It was a surreal experience in many ways. I've been reporting on the ground here in the Middle East for more than 6 years for Fox, and this is only the second time that I've lived through a ballistic missile attack here, and one other time when Iran launched a ballistic missile attack and I was reporting in Baghdad. But to see these missiles streaming through the skies of Israel and some of them getting intercepted, others actually impacting the ground, it was significant. And it was a major escalation as we look at this story and what comes next, because the Israelis have said time and time again that they will respond if an attack of this scale happens. So as it was happening in real time, the first thing that I was thinking was, how is Israel going to respond to this? And initial reports indicate it will be a heavy response.
Trey, it'll be a heavy response. That's something that came up last night in the debate between Vance and Waltz. I mean, can you just give us a sense as to how is the current sentiment right now in Israel about the support that they have received, or perhaps lack of support on some areas, when it comes to the Biden administration and what their approach has been since October 7th, particularly?
It's interesting because you get a variety of responses, and we talked to everyone involved, from the commandos who are currently in southern Lebanon to the soldiers that were fighting over the past year in Gaza to Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant. And there is a common sentiment among Israeli officials of frustration as it relates to the relationship with the United States. They're thankful for some support and frustrated with other support. And I'll just give you one example. Back in the middle of the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, remember that the Biden administration slowed the weapon shipments to Israel. They were still allowing certain ammunition and certain bombs to make their way to Israel, but others were put on pause temporarily. And there was frustration among the Israelis because those bombs weren't for Gaza. They were to basically target Hezbollah positions in the war that we're watching unfold now. And so behind the scenes, the relationship continues. It's very close, and their coordination is also quite high. When you think about even the response last night as these ballistic missiles were streaming through the sky, U.S. Central Command was involved in shooting some of them down. But publicly, there can be some disagreements, and that's part of the story that we cover here. But we're mostly focused on the day-to-day actions on the ground and what's taking place amid the war now that's unfolding in the northern part of the country.
We're talking to Trey Yingst, chief foreign correspondent for Fox on the ground in Israel. The book that he has, Black Saturday, an unfiltered account of the October 7th attack on Israel and the war in Gaza, was released yesterday. Trey, what was your experience like on October 7th? Where were you? How did you become aware of what was happening? And what was that day like for someone in Israel in your experience?
So I got a call on October 7th at 7:03 a.m. in the morning from my producer, and she said something's happening in the South. And normally when something's happening in the South, it's a rocket attack, and we knew that rockets were being fired not only in southern Israel, but also into central Israel. And so we thought this was sort of the status quo of an attack from Gaza launched by Hamas or Islamic Jihad. Maybe there was something that we missed, and this was the initial thought process. Maybe there was a targeted assassination that the Israelis took out a commander. Something didn't make sense. And as we got closer to the Gaza border to start reporting in the location that we always report from, we slowly started to piece together what was happening. And when we stopped at one intersection and got out of the car, we could hear gunfire in the distance. And this was the first major sign that something was wrong, something was different. And as we reported throughout the day, that intersection turned into a triage point, and we watched soldiers and civilians wounded by gunfire be worked on in front of us. Some died, others were taken to hospitals in southern Israeli cities. And a war erupted between Israel and Hamas that still continues today.
Trey, in the book, I know you get into some of this, but there was we were heartbroken here. We covered October 7th, from thousands of miles away, but it was felt all too real and horrific. just as the details came in for all of us, including everyone listening all over the country. What do you want people to know about what happened that day? And I mean, there were some people who came out in the media and elsewhere afterwards to say, well, some aspects of what was initially claimed were unverified, or there was some exaggeration or anything like that. I wanted you, as somebody who's on the ground and has seen and been to these places yourself, what is true and what is not about the commentary that came out after October 7th?
I think there are a lot of people who have opinions about the war that's unfolding, and I'm not one of those people. I carry very few opinions about this conflict or others. We're focused on the facts on the ground, and that's what you'll see when you read Black Saturday, and it's also what you'll see when you watch Fox and you see our reports live from the ground in not only this war zone, but war zones around the world. The morning of October 7th was quite confusing from an information standpoint, and I was very careful with what we were gathering and also very careful with what we were putting out to the public, understanding that this was such a real-time breaking news situation that I needed to be patient with a lot of the information. And that's a critical point that I make in the book, and it's something that I really believe in. It's patience and information, because I'd rather be right than first. And it doesn't matter if it's covering the war between Israel and Hamas in the times that we were entering the Gaza Strip, or if it's the war that's unfolding now between Israel and Hezbollah. When people talk about this conflict, I think there's another really important thing to remember, and this probably gets more to the core of your question. The October 7th massacre was the largest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. That is an objective fact. The Israeli response against Gaza has led to the highest death toll among Palestinian civilians in the history of their people. These are two facts that are true at the same time. And that's why I encourage people to have empathy for those who are affected by this war, because there are millions of people in the region. They have a variety of viewpoints, they have a variety of opinions, and they do a variety of different actions. And so often when people talk about the Middle East or they talk about Israelis and Palestinians, they want to very quickly put people into two camps. But the reality is, and I talk about this in Black Saturday, is that the people who live on the ground here and experience this every day exist on a spectrum. And I think the only information that you should trust about what is happening as it relates to the war in Gaza or the war that's taking place right now between Israel and Hezbollah is information that properly covers all viewpoints, that gives you a true understanding of the complexities and the uncomfortable truths about war, because war is not pretty. It's complicated, it's complex, but at the end of the day, we have to get to the bottom line facts. Because if you don't, and we saw this throughout the past year, it can lead to other consequences that have really serious implications, not just for the region, but for the whole world.
Trey, we talk a lot about post-traumatic stress for soldiers when they return from places where they've deployed based on what they've seen. I'm curious for you and other reporters and other individuals who are civilians who are outside of combat roles, how do you process, contemplate, and remain able to do your job based on what you have seen? And how do you manage that? And what have you found to work? And what would you say to maybe somebody out there who is listening to us right now, and maybe they're a kid and one day they think, hey, I'd like to be a journalist like Trey is. What have you learned?
Well, I tell my team something very often, and it's something that I tell myself very often. It's actually the background of my phone, and it's stay focused on the mission. And that's something that guides me, remembering what my mission is, and that is to provide fair, objective, and truthful journalism to our audience and to my readers. But it's challenging to cover a story like this. We witnessed death and destruction firsthand, and I think on a high level, it's remembering to be empathetic and understanding of everyone involved in the stories that we cover, and try to get to the core of why people do what they do. And on a more simple level, it's seeing horrific things and then knowing that you need to process the aftermath of that in a healthy way, not turning to drugs and alcohol to deal with the thoughts that you have and the memories that you have of these scenes, not only in southern Israel, but also in Gaza. And for me, that's cold exposure. That's eating healthy. That's working out. That is talking about mental health and not being afraid to discuss it, because I think that's also a critical component in all of this. And if you're listening and you're someone who is afraid to talk about mental health, I'd encourage you to speak to your friends, speak to your loved ones, speak to a trained professional like a therapist. You don't have to be afraid to talk about your mind. And it doesn't make you less cool. It doesn't make you any less afraid than we all are to be here in this life and on earth. And for me, I think that it has been an opportunity to be able to talk about mental health, because I think a lot of people watch what we do and they see us go into these battle zones and embedded with militaries and on the front lines of conflict around the world. And they say, wow, that he's cool. He's there. He's on the front lines. He's seeing it. And I want to be a voice for people who are afraid to speak out about mental health and say, look, I talk about it. You can talk about it too. And you can go a step further. Not only talk about it, but you can think of healthy ways to handle your mind. You can do the cold exposure. You can do the working out, the running, and you can try to have a healthy lifestyle so that you can create an environment for yourself to flourish and be the best version of yourself.
Trey Yingst, he is the chief foreign correspondent for Fox on the ground in Israel, the author of Black Saturday, Unfiltered Account of the October 7th attack on Israel and the war in Gaza. In bookstores now. We appreciate your time. Stay safe.
Thank you, guys.
Look, I want to tell you, speaking of what Trey has seen in Israel, certainly there are still people who have very vivid memories of what happened in this country on September 11th. And last weekend was the annual Tunnel to Towers 5K run and walk in New York City. Our producer, Allie, and her husband, Gerard, did it along with tens of thousands of fellow patriots. The event retraces firefighter Stephen Siller's footsteps from the foot of the Battery Tunnel to the Twin Towers, where he raced on 9/11 to try to save lives and in the process sacrificed his own. Stephen's brother, Frank Siller, friend of the show, started the 5K, which pays homage to the 343 FDNY firefighters, law enforcement officers, thousands of civilians who lost their lives that day. If you're watching on the live stream, you'll see the video that Allie shot, which we also shared on social media. It was pouring rain that day, but it didn't stop the nearly 40,000 participants from coming together and doing the event. Proceeds support Tunnel to Towers programs, including those benefiting first responders, catastrophically injured service members. They have events all year round. I'm going to be up helping to raise money at their golf outing in a couple of weeks. You can go find an event near you at t2t.org, or you can donate and thank them for the incredible work they're doing, just like both Buck and I have done. You can donate $11 a month at t2t.org. That's T2T.org.